Jack said, placing the cup in front of me. Not sure if I got it right, but I didn't want you to have to think about where to begin today. Type sub-zip, his words caught in my throat. In his eyes, I saw not only the sorrow of losing a father, but a quiet resolve, not to let me walk through grief alone. In the days that followed, Jack didn't speak much, but he was always there. When I couldn't bring myself to cook, Jack did. When I avoided the living room because David's old slippers were still there, Jack turned on the TV and coaxed me to sit beside him and watch the old family movies we used to love. When I stared at the empty space beside me in bed, Jack left a light blanket by the door and said, "If you can't sleep, call me anytime." Losing someone doesn't always come with loud crying. Some grief sits quietly in your chest, tightening every breath. I didn't know how to move forward, but in Jack's gaze and the way he gently arranged each meal, each step of the day, I was reminded I still had family. There was still someone who needed me, who loved me, and who wanted me to keep living, not just to survive. That morning began like any other. A gentle spring morning, the breeze carrying the scent of jasmine from the trellis out front. I was arranging a vase of fresh chrysanthemums when Jack walked into the kitchen, a slightly mysterious look on his face, hiding something behind his back. "Good morning, Mom," he said, then leaned in to kiss my cheek, a gesture he'd made a habit of since David passed, as a quiet form of comfort. "I've got a little surprise." I tilted my head, raising an eyebrow with a smile. "What now? You planning to drag me out to plant vegetables again?" "Nope, something better than that," Jack said, his eyes lighting up as if he were about to whisk me off on some youthful adventure. "Come outside for a moment, Mom." We stepped down to the yard. The sky was a clear blue, the sun warm but not too bright. In the driveway sat a silver convertible, gleaming like a dream. I recognized it instantly. The car I once jokingly said, if I had a miracle, I'd drive that down the coastal highway, hair flying in the wind like the women in the movies. I froze. "Jack," I whispered his name, my voice catching. "That car, do you like it?" Jack gave a soft, slightly shy smile, but his eyes were filled with warmth. "It's yours." "Don't ask where I got the money," he cut in, stepping closer to take my hand. "Just know this, you deserve it. You spent your youth caring for this family, for me, for Dad. I just wanted to show you that you can still live brightly." Jack's voice softened. "I've seen you sad for too long." I turned away to hide the sting in my eyes. A rush of emotions rose inside me. Gratitude, disbelief, and a tidal wave of love. "You didn't have to do something so big just to make me happy," I whispered. "No, Mom, you don't get it," Jack said, gently tightening his grip on my hand. "This isn't about making you happy. It's a reminder that you can still steer your own life wherever you want. That you're no longer bound by loss. That you get to keep living because you." I pulled Jack into an embrace, holding him tightly. My heart felt like it was melting. That afternoon, we drove the new car out of town, the wind rushing through our hair, the scent of wildflowers in the air. Jack put on an old song, one David used to play every wedding anniversary. I laughed through my tears. The road stretched out before us, beautiful, still, free. I wasn't just given a car. Jack had given me a piece of himself. A small door back into the world after so many months of retreating into the dark. And I knew somehow, somewhere far away, David was smiling too. Since that afternoon, I began to feel something shifting within me. Not clearly, not loudly, but like an underground stream quietly flowing through the cracks of a soul dried up by grief. Jack never said much, but he acted in subtle, quiet ways that I couldn't help but notice. One early morning, just as I was waking up, the house already smelled of toasted bread and fragrant coffee. Jack, in a simple white t-shirt, was busy by the coffee machine. He turned and smiled. "You slept in too long. I figured you deserve a breakfast that doesn't require a frying pan." I smiled, but my throat tightened. On the table was my favorite blue porcelain cup next to a plate a peanut butter toast, just the way I liked it. You spoiled me for years, Mom. It's time I learned to spoil you a little in return. I didn't answer. I just looked at my son. The man I once held in my arms during the nights David was on emergency shifts, now grown enough to be my steady anchor. Jack did was never grand, but it always managed to reach the emptiest parts of my heart. When I blurted out, I still can't bring myself to go up to the attic. Dad's things are still there. Jack simply nodded. No pressure, no further questions. The next afternoon, I saw him quietly sorting through the boxes, folding David's old jackets, gently touching his glasses as if silently speaking to his late father. He packed everything neatly into labeled boxes that read, "When Mom's ready." One rainy day, I came down to the living room and saw a vase of white lilies carefully arranged on the table. David used to buy me flowers for no reason at all. I stood frozen. Jack, reading by the window, looked up and smiled. "The rain made the house feel gloomy. I thought you'd like some flowers." I couldn't say anything, only walked over to him and held his hand. Jack's light squeeze made me want to cry. The way he poured me a cup of tea on Sunday afternoons, the way he rested his hand on my shoulder when he saw me staring too long at an old photo, or simply the way he was always there when I felt like I might fall apart. All of it said one thing. "I'm still here, Mom. You're not alone." He didn't need grand declarations. Jack's care didn't come from obligation, but from something deeper, a quiet love that made me start to believe I could open my heart to life again. And the miracle was, day by day, I truly came back to life. I can't quite remember the exact moment I started smiling again, truly smiling from the heart. Maybe it was one evening when Jack played soft jazz in the living room and pulled me up from the couch. "Mom, teaching me that waltz you used to dance with Dad." I laughed. "Since when do you know how to dance?" "If I learned just so you could lead me through one song, does that count?" he replied, holding out his hand. Once my steps were awkward, my heart trembling, not because of the music, but because it had been so long since I'd touched someone in a gesture that intimate. But Jack wasn't in a rush. He moved gently, steadily, as if speaking through rhythm. "I'm here, lean on me, Mom." I don't know how much time passed, but when the music ended, I found my head resting on his shoulder, eyes stinging, not from sadness, but from something strangely unfamiliar. A feeling I thought I'd never touch again after David was gone. Peace. In the months that followed, Jack became my companion in every effort to return to life. He ordered books I used to love, planned a short getaway to the beach where David had proposed. He suggested we take a weekend cooking class, not because we needed to learn, because we needed to laugh. Remember our first attempt at making souffle? The dish David used to tease me about, calling it my ultimate weakness. Jack forgot to add eggs, then accidentally poured in too much vanilla. When the oven door opened, the dessert collapsed into a mess. I was about to scold him, but he scrunched his face and joked, "Well, Mom, the souffle might have fallen, but our spirits are still rising." And I laughed. A real, full-bodied laugh, effortless and free. And in that moment, I knew I was coming back to life. I started wearing dresses again. I dared to put on a hint of soft pink lipstick when going to the supermarket. Jack didn't say much, but the pride in his eyes when I stepped out of my room said everything. One evening, I was getting ready for dinner with an old friend, someone who used to work with David. I wore a moss green silk dress David had loved, one I'd kept tucked away in the closet since he passed. Jack paused for a second, then said softly, "I've never seen you look this beautiful." I blushed, laughed, and gave a small nod, because for the first time in over a year, I saw myself in the mirror too. A woman who hadn't fallen. Love doesn't always need to be named. It can live in a hug in the kitchen, a glance through the window, or simply a perfectly timed cup of tea on a cold day. And with Jack, a son raised in the warmth of a once happy home. I'm learning to live again, not just because a widowed mother, but as a whole human being. It started raining on a Friday night. The wind howled through the window cracks, the smell of damp earth and moisture drifting into the house with each gust. I had just finished setting the dinner table when the lights flickered a few times before going out completely. The house fell into silence, leaving only the sound of steady rain and my quiet call. Jack, hold on, Mom's looking for the flashlight, his voice rang out from the living room. A moment later, the soft beam of the flashlight swept across the kitchen. Jack stepped in, holding a candle and a box of matches. He set them down on the table and smiled. It's been a while since we've had a power outage, hasn't it? I nodded. My heart suddenly still as memories of past storms came rushing back, when David was still alive, and the whole family would huddle in the living room, light candles, play cards, or tell ghost stories to pass the time. Remember how your dad used to hide in the closet and jump out to scare you? I chuckled softly. Jack laughed too, his eyes glowing in the candlelight. Of course I remember, and he used to drag me out to play hide and seek when I was 8. It was storming like this that night too. I raised an eyebrow at him. So now that you're 28, you still want to play hide and seek? He nodded like it was a perfectly serious idea. Why not? You might not even find me this time. I laughed, unable to believe it. Fine. But if I catch you hiding under the table, I won't be able to keep a straight face. We started playing just like we used to when he was little. I counted loudly in the middle of the living room, 10, 9, 8. Jack's footsteps padded lightly in the dark, disappearing and reappearing. The flickering candlelight cast soft glows onto the ceiling, making everything feel both familiar and dreamlike. When I opened my eyes and began to search, the house was eerily quiet. I called out, Jack, where are you hiding? No answer. I walked through each room, the candle in my hand trembling slightly as the wind slipped through the cracks. Finally, when I opened the cupboard beneath the attic stairs, a figure burst out. I let out a startled squeal and burst into laughter, doubling over from the surprise and joy. Jack laughed uncontrollably too, his cheeks flushed like a little boy. We collapsed onto the wooden floor, gasping for breath between giggles. You're still a tough opponent, Jack said, reaching out to wipe the sweat from my forehead. And you're still the same mischievous kid who refuses to grow up, I replied. Though, in my heart, something had softened, like the rain outside finally quieting on the eaves. We returned to the living room. I lit a few more candles, placing them around the coffee table. And again, the atmosphere warmed, not so much from the light, but from a feeling of closeness. I poured hot tea, and as I handed Jack his cup, I looked at him for a long moment. In that instant, I realized, even though Jack was no longer the child who once needed me to carry him when thunder scared him, today he was the one lighting up the darkest days of my life. We sat close together on the long couch, talking quietly about old memories, about things we'd never said before, as if the storm outside had swept away all the distance time had once created. And I placed my hand on his, and Jack gently squeezed it back. It was a wordless gesture, but full of meaning. But nothing more was needed. Love, sometimes, is simply playing an old game with someone you love. On a rainy night, since that stormy night, something began to shift in the rhythm of my home. Not a dramatic change, but the kind that broods quietly, like the cusp of spring when no one knows exactly when it arrives, only that the sunlight feels softer, the wind less sharp, and flowers begin to bloom in familiar corners. I started sleeping better, waking up earlier, and sometimes I caught myself smiling without knowing exactly why. Jack, as always, was the one who brewed the morning tea and prepared a light breakfast before I came down to the kitchen. No need for many words. He always picked the cup I liked best, knew I didn't want anything too sweet early in the day, and always played an old playlist of songs I used to listen to with David. I didn't think you'd be willing to hear these songs again, I said one morning as Can't Help Falling in Love began to play. Jack shrugged, pouring more hot water into the teapot. I just thought, if music was once the best part of a memory, maybe it shouldn't be thrown away. I didn't say anything, I just looked at him. Sometimes I wondered, how could a 28-year-old understand my heart so well? I started cleaning out the attic where we kept many of David's old belongings, things I hadn't had the courage to touch before. This time, Jack simply stood beside me, never interfering. He helped when I needed him to, and quietly stepped away when he sensed I needed space. Among the old boxes, I found a letter David had written but never sent, his familiar slanted handwriting still faintly carrying the scent of aged paper. He had written it for a birthday I had long since forgotten. In the letter, he thanked me for my patience, for all the years we had endured together, both the sweet and the brutal ones. I read in silence, tears falling soundlessly. When I folded the letter and looked up, Jack was standing at the doorway. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I nodded. "Better than you think." "Thank you for not rushing me before I was ready." Jack stepped forward and placed a hand on my shoulder. "Everyone has their own pace for healing. I just want you to know you don't have to walk it alone." That day, I decided to replant the flowers on the porch, the same ones that used to bring David joy every afternoon. Jack helped me choose new soil and buy fresh fertilizer. He even joked, "I'd rather scrub the bathroom 10 times than deal with fertilizer, but for you, I'll do it." We both laughed. In the days that followed, we learned to cook new dishes together, from European recipes to Japanese vegetarian meals. One time, I overcooked the salmon, and Jack still nodded earnestly. Very creative, Mom. And then we burst into laughter at the way he tried so hard to eat the whole thing. But the most memorable moment came one weekend afternoon when Jack came home holding a flyer. "There's a therapeutic yoga class opening up 10 minutes from here. Want to try it?" And then I looked at him, skeptical. "I'm old, my body's stiff as pine wood. Yoga sounds impossible." "That's exactly why you should go. Try the first class. If it's not for you, drop it, but give it a shot." And I did. That first session was awkward, but the instructor was gentle and the breathing exercises helped me feel my breath clearly for the first time in a long time. When I walked out, Jack was waiting in the car, holding the door open and handing me a cold bottle of water. He didn't ask, didn't rush me. He just looked at me quietly as if wondering, "Did you feel a little lighter today, Mom?" I nodded, and Jack smiled. It's how we lived. No pressure, no expectations. Just small steps, gentle choices, slowly guiding me out of the darkness. There was no miracle, but there was a young man willing to slow down. Third, he walked with me on this slow, uncertain path. It was a Saturday night with a light drizzle falling outside. I had just turned off the kitchen lights after a simple dinner when Jack came in from the living room carrying an old box. I recognized it immediately. The wooden box David used to keep letters and small mementos. "Do you remember this?" Jack asked, placing it on the table, his voice soft like the breeze. I touched the lid, running my fingers over the faded scratches worn by time. "I thought it was lost," I whispered. Jack opened the lid. Inside were handwritten letters, an old notebook of Christmas wishes, and photos of our family from when Jack was little. We sat across from each other, the light from the table lamp casting a warm golden hue over the surface, as if time had softened its edges. I picked up a photo, David holding a 3-year-old Jack. On his shoulders, both of them beaming in a field of wild daisies. "Your dad always said you were a miniature version of him," I said, my lips trembling as I looked into the brightness in their eyes. Jack gave a quiet smile. "Maybe that's true, but I've never felt like I could replace him." "No one can replace your father, Jack," I said, my gaze still fixed on the photo. "But you don't have to be him. You are yourself, and that's enough." We read the letters together. One was from David to me on my 45th birthday, short, simple, but full of love. Another was to Jack on his 16th birthday, words of guidance on how being a man doesn't mean being tough, just being kind and keeping your word. I turned to Jack, tears streaming down my cheeks, but they no longer felt heavy. "I used to think I couldn't live fully without your father, but today I realize his love is still here through you, through everything you do for me." Jack didn't respond. He stood up, walked around the table, and gently wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. "You were never alone. Not with Dad, not with me." I placed my hand over his arm and gave a gentle squeeze. In that embrace, I felt small again. Not a mother who had to be strong, not a wife holding it all together, just a woman being loved with quiet tenderness. We sat there together for a long time, saying nothing more. Outside the window, the rain continued to fall softly, as if reminding me that some memories don't need to be forgotten. They just need to be held with gentler hands. When Jack stood up and said goodnight, I held his hand just a little longer. Thank you, Jack, not just for the night, but for everything. He leaned down and kissed my forehead. Good night, Mom. That night, for the first time in many months, I dreamed of David, not in grief, but in a warm dream. He was smiling at me and Jack as if to say, you're both doing just fine. Spring arrived gently, without warning. That morning, I opened the window and caught the first sunlight touching the treetops in the garden. Tiny flower buds beginning to bloom, delicate yet full of life. Jack walked into the kitchen holding 2 cups of coffee, one for him, one for me. Did you sleep well, Mom? His voice was as gentle as always, but there was something different, a quiet joy sparkling in his eyes. I nodded, taking the warm cup from his hand. Very well, thank you, sweetheart. We sat together on the porch. The air was still, filled only with the sound of morning birds and the soft clink of a spoon against porcelain. A true peace. No longer the silence of sorrow, but the stillness of something found again. Jack set his cup down and turned to me. Okay, I just booked 2 tickets, a little weekend trip. To where? I asked, surprised. The coast. You once said you wanted to watch the sunset by the sea again, but then Dad passed, and you missed that chance. He hesitated a little. So now we're going to do it together. I smiled. Sometimes happiness comes from the simplest things. A warm cup of coffee, a fresh morning breeze, and someone who remembers your quiet dreams. That evening, I took out the long white dress I had folded and tucked away in a closet for years. The dress David once gave me for a special occasion. I had been too afraid to wear it again, fearing it would stir up too many memories. But this time, I put it on not to remember, but to move forward. When I walked into the living room, Jack looked up. You look truly beautiful, he said, his voice honest and light as the breeze. Dad would be so proud. I looked at my grown son, not just tall, but steady, thoughtful, and full of love. And in his eyes, I saw not only a son, but a companion, a guiding light that had helped me through the dark. That trip to the beach was unforgettable. We laughed, played like when Jack was a boy, walked barefoot on the sand, ate ice cream under the sun, and watched the sun slowly dip below the horizon. As the sky turned crimson, I gently took Jack's hand. Thank you, I said, for not leaving me when I thought I couldn't stand again. Jack squeezed my hand. Ever planned to? You're my home, Mom, and you deserve every good thing. In that moment, I no longer saw myself as a grieving widow holding on to pain. I saw a mother being reborn, a woman beginning to love life again, not only for David, but for Jack and for myself. We returned home in the soft light of a calm afternoon. As Jack carried the suitcase ahead into the house, I paused at the doorway, turning back to look at the sky tinged in pale orange. I whispered, thank you, David, for leaving me the most precious gift, Jack, and a love that never faded. And I knew deep in my heart, a new chapter had begun, a chapter of healing, of hope, and of love no longer left unspoken. Here is the full English translation rendered with complete accuracy and emotional fidelity, nothing added or omitted. Loss can make us feel as if we'll never be able to move forward, but it is in the simplest moments, a cup of tea, a hand held, a look of empathy, that we often find something miraculous. Life is still waiting for us ahead. The story of the mother and son is not just a journey through grief, but a gentle reminder that sincere love, no matter where it comes from, holds a healing power far greater than we imagine. Love while you still can. And never forget, you deserve to keep living, not just for the past, but for the present and the future as well.